Well, it's time to go out into the shop. So I guess I better dress for the cold weather since it's late November. Okay, I'm ready to brave the cold. First, we'll look at my anvil collection as we go out into our breezeway. And there's my anvil collection. They're not very big, are they? Well, we'll see if we have some more around later. We'll start by just taking a quick shot at the wood shop, not to show off the wood shop, but to just make a couple of points. So, as we walk through the wood shop here, which also doubles as garden tractor maintenance, as you see there. Oh, I might add that I have very well insulated garage doors in both the metal shop and the wood shop so that it's easy to get stuff in and out of there. The main reason we're out here is just to point out that this is where I store my Hausfeld number 2 bender, and behind it, it's kind of hard to see the boxes, but they are full of dies for that. And then hiding here behind the air compressor is another one of these little mini Hausfelds that Harbor Freight, I don't know if they still do, but used to sell for $100 or something like that. And then the only other thing is, this is just my motor, my saved up motor collection and some hydraulic stuff. And that's the air compressor that supplies, well, I've got 2 air compressors, and this is a 5-horse, supplies air all over the wood shop and the garage building. Here I have laid out some of the projects that I demonstrate when I'm demonstrating before the public. I think I'm teaching them blacksmithing. I hope they're learning something about blacksmithing and being entertained. So everything is relatively simple, easy to make. When I used to demonstrate at the Minnesota State Fair, I actually had a group of 6 projects that I would demonstrate over and over again that I chose because they would garner the most interest from the people watching and get the most audience participation. So now we'll go toward the utility room in the metal shop. And this is the utility building or utility room, and the only reason for dragging you out here is to show my 20-ton Harbor Freight style press, which is converted to air over hydraulic. It has its own air cylinder to retract the drive cylinder, and down here it's got foot pedals for up and down. And then over here, a whole bunch, like everybody has, of miscellaneous hammers and struck tools and so on. Another one of those little Harbor Freight mini Hausfelds. And a really great little tool, which is this light duty. Out into the garage part of the main shop building. I just want to show a couple of things here. I have a lot of attic storage up above these shops, and these stairs are powered by that hoist up there from the pendant that is hanging here. So the reason we're out here, we're not going to talk about gasifiers and stuff today, is just to point out that I've got a couple of, well, a slip roll here, a Niagara slip roll, and another sheet metal roller that I bought some time ago, not realizing it wasn't a slip roll at the time. And is it a 3? I don't know, a number 2 or a number 3 Beverly shear. And I had Clay Spencer sharpen the blades for me here a couple of years ago, and boy, that is a monster. Works really great. Hiding under here is a gas forge of the Hans Piat design. And I haven't used him a lot lately. I really prefer my coal forge, but sometimes I'll get that out and I've got a stand for it in another building, and it works really, really well. I personally don't see any reason to make any other design than that one. Here's my demonstrating anvil. Hiding over here. This, I think, is 125 pounds. First anvil I ever bought, I think. I paid 50 bucks for it. Well, we've been demonstrating for some period of time. There's a little display. Those are ribbons for demonstrators. Never for winning anything, I don't think. But anyway, just a bunch of years worth of demonstrations. Pennant from one Urbana conference. Framed picture of one of the Now Then Threshing Show announcements. So now we'll go out into the metal shop. There you can see my forge. It's got a 12-inch chimney with a 14-inch, or is it 16-inch? Probably a 16-inch Class 2 a chimney to it, from where you see it get shiny to about another 10 or 12 feet up out above the roof. And this has worked extremely well since we put it in 1986. This is my main trip hammer. Again, that's been there since probably 85 or 86. There's just a wheel grinder that I've had there for many, many years, and this cabinet contains lathe accessories in 2 drawers. One drawer is dedicated to round stock that is less than about 2 feet long, and one other drawer to square and flat stock, rectangular and flat stock, that's less than 24 inches long. And you can see sort of behind the forge and the trip hammer, there's a 3-shelf, if you will, storage rack that holds stuff up to 12 feet long, right behind there, and it goes all the way to the door over there. This is an experimental 2500 watt induction heater of a style that's called a ZVS, for zero voltage switching, and I have that in a smaller one that I test various ideas on for myself and for a number of other sort of followers that I have had over the last number of years. This is a fixture cabinet and drills and stuff, and as I think a lot of people do, I've got some tables on there that are useful to me. There are drill bits, various chisels and things, drifts, I don't know, kits of stuff that I sell now and then. There's collet sets and brooches and so on, just stuff that's associated with a metal shop, I guess you might say. There are drill bits and transfer punches there, and there's one Silver and Deming outfit there that you can see sort of in the middle of the shot that goes from whatever it is, like just over 1/2 inch up to 1 inch, and then to the left, that rack, if you will, is kind of miscellaneous 1/2 inch and over drill bits, kind of mixed. You can probably see this is where I store some of my chisels and punches and my basic set of indoor files. Behind the trip hammer, this is storage for various trip hammer tooling. And for what it's worth, this is an ancient Barber Coleman Wheel Co. Temperature controller of the vacuum tube style. Storage cabinet to the right of my forge is just a lot of miscellaneous. It's really miscellaneous. A lot of fixtures, welding rods, insulating material, so on. And then to the right of that is a rack for storing stuff that's roughly 4 feet to about 8 or 9 feet tall. And I have another building that we'll go to where I store really long stuff. And when I bring something in from there and cut it down, if it cut down to, oh, say 8 feet or less, it goes in here. If it's in the area of 12 feet, then it goes behind this area that I mentioned a little bit ago. Sooner or later, as this fills up, which it does every couple of years, I have to reassign it, if you will, sometimes taking it back out to the other building or whatever needs done. Here's my main engine lathe, and this is my method of keeping it clean. This is a 1940s Atlas 10F engine lathe, and it's my main lathe, and I've got it pretty well tooled. I've got a number of chucks and collets and so on. Here's more storage below the lathe, and this is just stock that I've used for something, and these are the offcuts that I just thought were too good to get rid of, so they're just all mounding up there between the door and the lathe. This 1-inch belt sander is probably the most used tool in the shop. Right now I've got an abrasive, a Scotch-Brite kind of a wheel on there that uses one of those, in this case, left-hand screw things that just, it just screws on. But I also have a drill chuck and a number of other things that can go in there. And and I have a whole bunch of things that fit this thing. That coffee can there is full of them, and belts for the belt sander. And as we look at the window and the windowsill, there's a bunch of tools for that go on to the 1-inch belt sander. And then miscellaneous, more fixtures, a whole bunch of a rack of Hardy tooling, as you might expect, an 8-inch wheel Delta grinder. I don't know if I ever did point out my main anvil, but it's 187 pounds and it's from the middle 80s. Ollie rebuilt it for me many years ago. And there's my old buzz box, a post vise, and as many of you know, I use New Holland Baylor flywheels as a base, and they weigh about 250 pounds a piece. And then, of course, more fixtures are stored there. Treadle hammer, and some of the fixturing that hangs around up there is specifically for the treadle hammer. Down there is a little flux core 90 amp welder, and there's my 50 amp plasma cutter. That pan there, that hog feeder pan, I put 1 inch of water in that when I'm going to do plasma cutting of things that are small enough, and I use that grate as a sort of a plasma cutting table there. A swage block with a shovel depression in it, which has been handy for many years. This is my ancient Gallmeyer and Livingston Model 35 surface grinder, and 95% of everything I've ever done with it has been in grinding anvils for people and myself. It's 3-phase. It's got a 1.5 horse hydraulic pump and a 3-horse spindle. So many years ago I made my own phase converter, and there's the capacitors and relay and switch and stuff, and the idler motor is on the floor there. And my coolant tank is a tote with a kind of, what do they call that? The swamp cooler pump that they use down in Arizona, where they just, you know, evaporate water for cooling. What are they, 20 bucks a piece or something? And they last about 15 or 20 years, and then I replace them as needed. 100 amp service just for this room. Second air compressor, which has air in 2-3 places in this room and a couple places in the next room, and a couple of outputs in the garage building. In this cabinet above the grinder, grinding wheel, extra grinding wheels, grinding accessories, and milling accessories, collets and vices and stuff like that. Then next to that, this cabinet is 99% milling accessories, clamping fixtures there, and those are 1/2-inch bolts, so they fit the ways in the surface grinder. And then over here are 5/8, and they fit the milling machine. This is my ancient US machine tool milling machine. It's a 9 by 36-inch bed. I've added a DRO, a 2-axis DRO to it to make up for the slop in the ways, and can't tell you how much stuff I've made on that over the years. And here is a bunch of fixturing, more fixturing, and cutters and so on for that. As we move past the milling machine, here we have Hobart, I don't know, 250, what is it? Yeah, Beta MIG 250, MIG welder with the argon tank. And then sitting on top of it, of course, there's about a 50-foot extension cord and a toolbox full of accessories for that particular welder. Next to that is my Craftsman drill press that my wife gave me for my birthday in 1960. And in between there is a little table that a friend made for me, and that's my sort of small stuff welding table, and behind it storage for extra drill bits and so on. This particular drill press, I've added an extra motor and a 6-inch pulley on the bottom of the main drive motor to act so that the main drive motor can be unplugged and just act as a jack shaft, and that added motor slows things down by a factor of 4 to 1, which gets me down to about 150 RPM when I'm swinging a large tool like a fly cutter or a large hole saw, or drilling pretty big holes. And above that is a cabinet. It has a die grinder and a band file and a bunch of accessories for that sort of thing, and some accessories for the drill press. I have a XY table on the drill press that I leave there probably 99% of the time. In fact, I can't think of the last time that I took it off. Standing beside the drill press and, you know, turning around 180 degrees, here is an Ickler belt sander, and under the black bag there is a whole bunch of extra belts. I used to work for 3M, and every once in a while in the company store there'd be like 25 belts for $2 or something like that. So I'm sure I have a lifetime supply. And next to this is my oxyacetylene, oxypropane rig, and I've had this for 40 years, 50. And I bought the oxygen cylinder back when there was Capital City Welding in the cities, but I never bought an acetylene tank. I've always used the type B acetylene cylinders, which are unregulated. And for this particular rig, I have propane with its own regulator, acetylene with its own regulator, quick disconnects, and then of course my hoses and stuff. And right now what's on there is a cutting torch, a cutting head with a propane oxygen tip on it. And I use that an awful lot. And the only time I really need acetylene is when I'm actually, you know, welding steel. And of course, to the right of the welder is just more stock that is more stock, and probably the only person in the world who could just go and get something out of there is me. Okay, and as we come around from the welding machine and the junky storage there, we come to what I call the Ollie Bench, which is a bench that I bought from Ollie many years ago when he built a bigger one. And underneath it are stored tooling that would be common to the bench and the forge. Generally, I can round that stuff up and put it in a 5-gallon pail, and it's a lot of support materials that I needed when I used to go demonstrating to the public. And on top of the bench is another bunch of stuff that I would take with me when I was demonstrating. Other than that, it's just the kind of things that you'd expect to see. And of course, the piece de resistance of my whole career, if you will, is producing this chest with a huge amount of help from Tom Lathe. And the toolbox behind it is full of tooling and fixtures that I put together during the period that we were making those chests and a padlock. And so it's just well, it's full of specialized equipment just for making those things. Here you see a rack that Ollie had produced to hold hammers and stuff, and that unbolts easily if I go to take it someplace. And so also this bench has got a so-so quality vise on it, so that when I'm demonstrating, sometimes I don't have to take a post vise with me. And just beyond the chest, you can see a whole bunch of files, and those files are all small specialized files that are for working with equipment or with projects like that chest. And then beyond that is a 9-inch disc grinder that I built up 50 or 60 years ago, or maybe even more. As we move around from the Ickler grinder, this is just a mechanic's tool chest, nothing special there. And this is a machinist's tool chest, and I don't think you'll find anything extraordinary there. Down on this upper shelf is a lot of tooling that I produced during my learning blacksmithing years from people like George Dixon and Peter Ross and Jay Close and Tom Lathe, of course. Then as we come around from the drill press toward what would be the east wall of the shop, there are some storyboards up there that I've taken from place to place. Here's a cabinet that's just full of stuff. The only thing of note in this whole cabinet, other than junk, is that I have an erector set collection of about a dozen different erector sets. This section of shelving here that's kind of sandwiched into the right of that cabinet, it just contains, again, more stuff. Then, as we move, almost done by the way, I have a very well insulated garage door in both this shop, the metal shop, and in the wood shop. And the idea is there that I can get access to get things in and out if I need to. I didn't say it was easy, especially in this shop, to get ready to open that door up and drive in a big tractor, you know, and carry in a milling machine, but it is doable anyway. And that's worked out really well. One of the things I'm kind of proud of is this storage. And this is storage for stuff that's like over 24 inches and less than 6 feet. And it's these 5-gallon pails, and each one of them is on one of these Harbor Freight, the smaller of the Harbor Freight furniture dollies. And I'd used those for many years, the 5-gallon pail thing, but the materials would flop all over the place. So what I've done more recently is to create that plywood or particle board X-shaped pieces that just slide down in there, and that divides the pail up into fourths, and that keeps stuff more vertical than it would otherwise be. And I'm really happy with those. You know, if I did anything, that's a little more reasonable. And the stock, although it probably doesn't look like it from here, is somewhat sorted. At least I know, you know, where to go first. Moving on, these are my railroad anvils. Only a couple of them are what I'd call finished, so the rest are sort of in progress as I get time and desire to work on them. The littlest one on top, I think, weighs 29 pounds, and the heaviest one, which is labeled, I don't know if you can see the T1, but that one there is, I don't know, 60, 70 pounds, something like that. And that's had a lot of work done to it. And then, almost to the end, this cart here is just full of stuff again, but the main focus of all the cardboard boxes there are parts for engine lathes, the Atlas kind of lathes that I have a couple of. And it's always one of these days I'm going to convert that from a manual gear change to a quick change gearbox. Just haven't got around to it yet, but I continue to sort of collect these things when they fall on me. Here's my 4x6 Taiwanese vertical horizontal bandsaw. I got this brand new at a pawn shop probably 40 years ago for 50 bucks, and it has worked out extremely well for me. And on the floor here is a specialized fixture for holding short stock. And I guess I might add, here's a couple of more type B acetylene cylinders. There's another one over there. They just kind of keep following me home. And I do have complete Prestolite outfits for a couple of them, and I have a nice little outfit. Oh yeah, right here. This is a whole nice little oxyacetylene outfit, and I have a tiny torch for that. And then I think almost lastly in the shop here is a 10-inch Delta, basically wood cutting bandsaw. Another one of those things I've had for 40 or 50 years, that I added a second drive motor to, which you can see right there, which is a gear reduction motor. And so I have a short belt and a long belt, and if I want to cut wood, I use the long belt and hook up to that motor, which goes full speed. And if I want to do metal at around 250 feet or surface feet per minute, I hook up to that motor. And again, that has done me great service over many, many, many years. Finally, in the corner there, that is my primary storage for tool steel. And so it's just everything that's tool steel gets stored in that corner. And I guess one more last thing is I've got that chalkboard there, and it's just a way to, you know, make notes for whatever purpose. So now let's see what's going on that's blacksmithing related outside of the metal shop. Over here is what I call the hay barn. Another name for it is my TTT building, that stands for trip hammers, tractors, and tracksters. We'll take a look in here primarily to look at trip hammers. As I said, this is my TTT building. Trip hammers, tractors, and in the back a mess of old machines called Cushman tracksters, which are probably pretty hard to identify even, but they're a 1960s and 70s little tiny vehicle. It has a 2-cycle engine. Anyway, there's about a dozen of them there. Okay, trip hammers. On the left here is a 50-pound Wisconsin Meyer Brothers hammer. And next to it is a 25-pound Wisconsin Little Giant hammer. Here is a old style 50-pound Little Giant. These are all Mankato hammers from here on. And this one is disassembled quite a bit, but I've got all the parts for it. I've even had the ram rebuilt, so I've got all brand new parts to put in it to totally rebuild it. Just haven't got around to it yet. So that's an old style Little Giant. Here is one of the rarer ones. This is called a transition hammer, and that's a 25-pound. And then next to that, the rustier looking one, is actually a new style 25 Little Giant. And here is, I think, probably really the rarest of the Little Giant hammers. They only made a few hundred of these. This is called an easy hammer. It's a helve hammer rather than a vertical ram hammer. This is the cheapest one I ever bought. I think I paid 20 bucks for it, but by the time I got it all rebuilt and everything, it was probably the most expensive hammer I ever bought, and probably 1,000 hours into it. So that's my outside collection of Little Giant trip hammers. The only other thing of interest here is this gas forge that I bought, I don't know, 30 years ago, and haven't even ever fired it up. It's got a small problem with a broken bracket there for the gas valve, but the valve is there. They just never fired it up. Now we'll move on from trip hammers to my last metal storage place, which is this old granary. It's 17 feet in diameter. We moved it here from a neighbor's place. That's a whole nother story. But this is where I store, I don't know, just stuff that doesn't fit anyplace else. So this is really just a mess of stuff. There's a drum mostly full of coal that probably isn't very good blacksmithing coal. Some heavy plate. There's a big old Edward shear there. A bunch of short pieces of tubing, square tubing. A lot of that sort of stuff we used to get at the guild conference from the companies that would donate drops and stuff for our silent auction, which I always loved. Again, more miscellaneous stuff. There's a forge hiding under there. I don't know what's of note. There's a bunch of offcuts of railroad rail that are ready to be made into anvils. A big pile of fire brick. I can just run out here and grab one whenever I need it. And then the area to the left of the fire brick and in front of it is where I store sheet goods that don't fit anywhere else, for the most part anyway. And then moving to the left a little bit, just more pieces that I've collected, so I can run out here and grab most whatever I want. There's a small drum full of rebar that I picked up from a bridge rebuilding process on the freeway one day. There's I think 6 or 8 drums full of coke, and that's 4x6 coke that I got for free many years ago, and I just break it up into small pieces whenever I'm going to do a lot of forge welding. So there's a lifetime supply. Here is a rack for long goods that'll hold maybe 12, 14 feet long stuff. And again, it's just you name it. It's a little organized into round and square and rods and so on. but there that is. Toward the rear there is some larger tubing and stuff, and a couple of tanks that I've collected for various reasons. Not to use for gases, although that propane tank is in good shape. Just from time to time I thought I would use them for some other purpose. Here again is just more miscellaneous stuff, just some large pieces that I might use someday, just a little offcut as a bracket or something. A large truck brake drum that makes a really good base. And I think everybody's got some of those dump rake teeth for using for high carbon steel for something when you get around to it. A guy sold me a bunch of brand new 5160 leaf spring drops a while back, so if you know anybody who wants to make knives out of 5160, I've got a lifetime supply. Laying around there, just more pieces of pipe that were too short to put any place else. And there are probably a half a dozen post vices there, another forge back there, a couple of baler flywheels, another big brake drum, again more miscellaneous stuff, and then anvils. I guess you can kind of see them. That's like about a 65-pound anvil. There is one of the Harbor Freight, I think that's called a 50-kilogram steel anvil, not cast iron, it's steel. It used to sell, and it's not all that hard a face, but it certainly was a good way to get started blacksmithing. And a little red railroad anvil looking thing. And just another shot of post vices and stuff, tubing. Rounds that I'd forgotten that I had. There's a 195-pound anvil, a solid cast steel, brand new, never even had the face ground. It's just as it came out of the mold, I guess. Never used it. Another shot at some anvils. Okay, so we've got the red anvil and whatever that thing is. I think it's actually a steel anvil. Kind of looks dumpy like a cast iron, but I think it's steel. But under that you can see kind of a square rusty piece there, and that's actually 3 pieces of 4-inch square stock welded one on top of each other with a couple of stabilizing plates underneath it, and the top plate, the top of the 3 squares is 4140 and the other 2 are mild steel. And Bob Bergman made some of those for the lacrosse Urbana conference years ago when the Japanese were here, and they call that a ground anvil. Anyway, that's kind of it for what's inside my really junkiest storage building. Sorry to spend so much time on the storage aspect of my metal shop, but I think it's a universal problem. I know I always learn a lot when I see how others tackle the issue of storage. And finally, I know this is just a hobby shop, but it meets my needs quite well. And you can get all the details about my shop's construction, heating, and power by going to www.spaco.org and by clicking on the My Machine Shop and My Shops links. Thank you for watching.